All doctors to the ER.
Do these guys have any idea what they are talking about?
Get squared away.
Spiritual.
Get squared away.
Emotional.
Get squared away.
Mental.
Get squared away.
Physical.
The podcast that'll help you get squared away.
All right, we are back with episode, I think we're on 47, brother. 47. Good Lord. Where have we been?
Well, it's almost my age.
It's getting there. Ooh. It's getting close.
Yeah. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. It's an interesting week here in Wisconsin. It's 50 degrees one day and 20 degrees another day. And I don't know. Did you see Mr. Biden's appointment to the head of the Nuclear Power Association or Nuclear Power Secretary?
No, it's
you didn't see this?
Homer Simpson, is it?
It's do you remember what is that movie that all the drag queens used to get dressed up to and go to downtown all the time? You remember that back in like the 80s or 90s? It was that drag queen movie. Anyways.
No, it sounds like Florida Keys.
Yeah, no.
Key
so
West.
It's so this gentleman is a flamboyantly gay, like, I guess sexual rights speaker or something that talks about, like, he's gotten up and done talks at colleges about like kinks and collar fetishes and dog stuff or animal stuff, or I have no idea.
In addition to the other dude dressed up like a lady.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
But I mean, he also is he is the job. Like, he is a nuclear scientist or whatever you would put in place. So, but it's just really interesting that it's almost like it's almost like affirmative action. Remember affirmative action from like the late 90s, where it's like, instead of looking for the best person for the job, we're looking to fill, the 9.9 white, 2.2 black, 1.1 Hispanic or Latino, check all the boxes, right? Like
the Supreme Court, requirements is got to be a black female.
Yeah, right. So, like it's not who's the best for the job.
Right.
Which is just so odd to me. I can't think of thinking it's almost racist in another way, or sexist in another way, right? It's like reverse sexism.
Well, it's not reverse. It's literally racism and sexism.
Yeah.
But, they're virtue signaling as it's supposed to be right now. Is there such a thing as right racism and wrong racism?
It's so weird. Like, why wouldn't we? I guess you're going to know the person for a job like that, so you really couldn't do it like faceless and nameless. But I mean, you almost want to like make it so that you have to read credentials and read a biography that has zero sexual connotation and zero race set to it, and then pick the best person for the job. And then, oh, look, they're a, transsexual black male. Oh, great. Perfect. Who cares? Like, they're the best for the job. That's who we picked. I don't give a shit what there are.
Yeah. They're trying to cater to that crowd. I mean, they got the midterms coming up, and I guarantee I'm starting to hear a little bit of murmurs about, now they're going to try to get the Asian vote because they didn't care about it before. Well, now they're starting to care. So now you're going to see some pro-Asian stuff start floating around.
That's interesting. What does pro-Asian propaganda look like?
I don't know. I don't know if it's getting rid of the Ivy League, stipulations where they, pretty much if you're Asian, they make it hard for you to get in. Your dock points on your incoming test. So I don't know. I really have no clue.
That's so weird. Like, I guess I don't know that culture enough to understand, right? And saying Asia is such a broad culture sweep, I guess. Like, the Korean culture is very different than the Filipino culture, which is very different than the Vietnamese culture, which is very different from the Chinese culture, right? Like, to be able to try to culturally appease that large of a group of people, I just feel like it's impossible.
Yeah. And you know how it started. this past week, they basically shoved a bunch of homeless community right in the middle of Chinatown in San Francisco.
Oh.
So obviously you're going to have some, dudes that are mentally jacked up.
Yes.
Well, one dude basically took a pipe and smacked an old Asian lady in the head. And what's the first thing they go to is they said, oh, this is, it's a hate crime. No, when really what it probably was some dude he's just mentally screwed up.
Yeah, he's mentally
and
ill.
The first person he sees, he's going to, whack with a pipe.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
And he's in Chinatown. So It's not
Exactly.
like the first person he sees is going to be a middle-aged white male.
Yeah. But it's,
Wow.
I don't know. It's all setting up to be this huge clown show. And they're just pushing identity politics. And like I said, you're going to see this, I think, rise of, there's Asian hate going on again. And they're going to try to push the Asian Lives Matter. The only difference with Asians is that most Asians don't care.
No.
They don't play that at all.
No, they have not been there. They don't play the victim mindset. They don't have the victim mindset. And to be able to successfully achieve identity politics, the identity that you're placating to has to have a woe is me victim mindset.
They have to get behind it and say, oh yeah, we have been persecuted. Yeah, we want some reparations, right? So yeah, that's not part of the Asian culture. I mean, it's not part of the Asian pride. So
it's one of my top performing posts whenever I talk about it. But Epictetus 2,000 years ago said, tell a man how he's been wronged enough times and he'll start to believe it.
Oh yeah.
And it's so true. And we were talking, we had friends, acquaintances that we were talking to, and she was I don't remember what her degree was, but her college thesis program was she was Native American and had Native American blood in her, and she wanted to show that basically the trauma and damage from the 100 years when the white man basically killed or changed the entire Native American population in the United States would be handed down generation to generation to generation via DNA, which they've shown in mice already. So they did these studies where they took these mice and they put them on a basically an electrical board, and so they could shock their feet, and they spritzed a smell in the air and they would shock their feet. And they would do this enough times that the spritz of the chemical, whatever it was, I think it was citrus that they used, they would get these mice so trained that the spritz of citrus would cause elevated stress responses without even shocking their feet. Okay. So it's basically basically like Pavlov's dogs, right?
Yeah.
It's conditioning. It's mental conditioning. It's basically the opposite of Pavlov's dogs. Instead of the bell being a good thing, the smell of citrus would, cause a stress response. They showed multiple generations after that, the babies of those mice that had never been shocked, they could still show an elevated stress response from the citrus, right? And so I think her idea was using this research to then prove that trauma can be handed down generation to generation, even if the next generation never experiences the trauma. Well, my question was, aren't you worried about giving a giant section of a population basically a scapegoat, right? I can't achieve anything because of this. I'm not able to kick alcoholism because my great grandfather was traumatized or whatever. Yeah. And she had no answer. Like it's one of those things where, and this is one of my favorite sayings, is like, if you're so worried about can you don't ask should you. And like what are the damage of being able to put those two things together and prove that trauma is generational? What damage can come from that? And it's kind of like it's that whole victim mindset thing.
Yeah, that's kind of funny because that's biblical too. That
I did not know. Tell me.
In the Bible, it talks about the sins of a father passes on generation to generation. So basically, until somebody decides to say, "Hey, I'm going to break this," chain, it's just going to keep passing on and passing on. Like one of I think it refers to a lot as like anger. So if you got an angry father, That's what happened in my lineage, is that anger passes on until, somebody breaks that.
Well, and that makes perfect sense, right? That's nature and nurture. The genes.
Alcoholics.
Yep. The genes,
abuse.
right? The genes that make you, if you want to talk about alcoholism, like they've basically narrowed down the genes that make it possible to be an alcoholic. It doesn't mean you're going to be an alcoholic, but it means it makes it, 100 times more likely or whatever that you're going to be an alcoholic. So if you have those genetics and you're raised in that household, so you have the nature and you have the nurture because you're raised in that household, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So I totally understand, visualizing that as they're living through the biblical times, right? Like they can see that. They can see that, John's dad's dad was an angry, fly off the handle, beat his kids, and then John was, and then now John's son is, right? Like we totally understand that.
Yep. Until somebody breaks that cycle.
Yeah. And you have to be, it has to be a conscious change, and man, conscious change is tough.
Yeah. I mean, the more generational passes through, the harder the work the last person's got to do to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, food for thought.
Right. So we have an interesting base to a podcast today. I will let you, I'm just going to let you roll, man. It's late here. It's 6:42. I go to bed in an hour, so I'm not sure if y'all know, but my brain doesn't function this late. I'm going to pipe in with some info here or there, but, go ahead.
I'll go, man. I mean, this is, it's been a crazy week. Last Saturday, found out it was like about 6:30 our time, or not 6:30, I'm sorry, 7:30 our time. And then my mom went to the hospital. So my mom lives in Hong Kong, and she's been talking the last 3 weeks about having issues with her heart. She referred to it as, her heart is getting weaker. She's having harder, time breathing. Medical over in a communist country is not that good. And she would talk about that quite a bit. But I think basically what happened, she was admitted in the hospital. Within a half hour, she had passed of a heart attack. And so it's been a crazy week. And I've been through a lot of death, a lot of grievance, starting since I was a child. I watched my father die in front of me, and I just thought, what really helped me kind of get through the first few days is getting squared away. And it kind of brought back a lot of memories of, a friend of mine was killed, and, he died in my arms. And, I had lost a couple too on deployment. One guy was trying to revive. We tried everything to revive him. And, it's something that's hard to explain. I never want to say, oh, if you haven't been through it, you don't understand. I think that's why we talk about this stuff now.
Yeah.
And, but it's, death is inevitable, right? Death and taxes.
Yep.
And it's something that, you have to learn how to deal with. And hopefully, from what I'm talking about, getting squared away will help some people through that, because, one of my buddies was joking this week saying, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you're going to weddings, everybody's having kids. But then when you start hitting, the 40s and 50s and 60s, guess what? You're attending more funerals than you are weddings. So, it's something we got to prepare for. And, everything that we've talked about, being squared away, mentally, physically, spiritually, especially emotionally, where we both have admitted we're weak at, is something you have to work on, especially, when the storms hit. And the biggest, analogy or allegory, you want to call it, one of those two fits it, but is how you build your house. You have 4 pillars, right? The 4 things we talked about: spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional. And those are the 4 pillars that, let's say you're in a house on an island, and you have 2 choices. You're going to basically put footings down, and you're going to put those 4 pillars in solid concrete, deep concrete. Or you have this other house that you build on the beach, on the sand, because what? It's ideal. It's not real, it's ideal. And it takes a lot less work, and it's cheaper, right? So the thing is, being in Wisconsin, we go through storms at night. I hear a lot of people, I tend to sleep through storms for some reason.
Yeah, me too.
So
They're almost peaceful.
yeah.
Like
I don't know what it is. The rumble.
Something peaceful in the chaos. I have no idea why, but yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. And you're in a house and the thunder's going and it's rumbling and you feel the house rock, right? You're getting rocked, but the house isn't getting taken down. Well, that's how I always picture, every time I've gone through a storm like that or a death, dealing with it is, you know what? If I take that time by myself to self-reflect, if I take that time to say, okay, what, instead of feeling sorry for myself and, oh, woe was me, why did this happen? I start going into what we'll talk about soon is gratitude.
Yeah.
I'll get rocked. I literally feel like I get rocked, emotionally and physically and mentally, but, I'm able to come out of it quicker and able to put things in perspective. And granted, people hearing this, I mean, it's going to hurt.
Yes.
It's going to hurt. I mean, it's, emotions are like the surf, but, getting squared away, working on that every day during the grievance process, it comes and goes, like the waves. Sometimes it'll hit you and it's okay. Sometimes the waterworks has to go and guess what? It's okay. You feel like you get it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, focused on folks or going back to the house. I mean, folks that don't spend time getting squared away, I've seen it. I've been to enough funerals where it's all of a sudden they're just like a complete mess. And they're not just a complete mess for the funeral, but they're just a mess for the week, 2 weeks. I've seen some up to 2-3 years on social media, where they're, it's okay to grieve and sometimes to publicize and maybe let people know that, hey, you lost somebody, right? But there's a difference between that and sometimes with social media, some people use that just purely for attention.
It's totally an attention play a lot of times. I mean, sometimes, sorry, I don't want to be an asshole and say a lot of times. Sometimes it is an attention play.
Yeah. We're not saying to be an ass. It's just, somebody told me once, in remembering the guys that we lost, there's a grievance period. And a lot of times that grievance period could last, 1 to 3 months. Sometimes it could be a week. But it comes time where you have to honor them because this is what most people that pass would want you to do. They don't want you to sit there and feel sorry for yourself. They don't want you to all of a sudden be a completely useless potato, sit on the couch and do absolutely nothing, or sit in bed all day because, you're depressed, because then it doesn't become about you. Or I'm sorry, it doesn't become about that person. It becomes all about you. And that's, sometimes when you get these posts that, you're wanting people to feel sorry for you, or, oh, I can't do anything. And it's, 5 years later. I mean, come on, would that make that person proud? Would that honor that person? No.
Yeah. And we talked when I just walked in here, we don't have a strong history of ceremony in our country. We don't have in our society, right? Like we have weddings, we have birthdays, we have funerals, but we don't have a really strong history of like the Irish wake, right? Like the idea of the Irish wake. And I think there's a lot of societies that do death a ton better than we do. And I've had this conversation with a friend about at some point, right? We have a lot of baby boomers right now, and the baby boomers are that's going to be one of the biggest, sad to say it, the biggest death population over the next 20, 30 years. And I was thinking that there has to be a better way to do funerals, right? Like instead of the stuffy, flower-ridden, churchy style funeral home, right? Yeah. What if we did a celebration of life funeral home where it is literally a party? There's going to be some waterworks. It's going to be sad, but it's a party. We tell stories, we have some drinks to, remember who the person was versus feeling bad and talking about the pain.
Yeah.
Let's remember the awesome times from these people. And can you imagine if you were, let's say you're 75, 80 and you're starting to think about that, right? Like you're starting to think about planning your own funeral, and that's one of the most powerful things, to know that you have that planned and paid for. Like, all right, we've got, I've got the casket, I've got the burial spot, I've got the celebration of life funeral home, I've got the song playlist, I've got the half barrel paid for, like whatever, right, like it's just you're planning your last party. Basically, you're planning your last awesome birthday party, but it's the opposite.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, for me, I don't need a casket. I'm like, well, cremate me. Yeah.
I remember
take me to the ocean.
I remember somebody, I don't remember who it was, but they went in and they were talking about, this might even been in a book, and they were talking about, all right, I need to pay for stuff because I need, I don't want my kids to have to deal with it. And they're like, oh, well, this is the cheapest casket we have, sir. And it was like $1,000 or something. And he's like, when John Doe dies on the street and the cops bring him in from the morgue and you have to bury him, what do you put him in? I want that one. Right? Like, I don't need anything fancy. And yeah, that's, some people have a weird thing with the cremation. Cement vaults, cement, even the cement burial chambers that you put the casket down into. Like, I remember somebody talking about that and they were like, well, I don't want worms to eat me. And I'm like, do you realize the nastiness of the parasites that are going to eat you if the worms don't get you first?
Exactly.
Like, I'd rather have bigger bugs eat me just in the dirt.
Yeah. You're not going to be fresh.
No.
There is no positive curve to that whole deal.
And there's some awesome stuff coming around. They're doing burial pods where you get buried like under a tree. Basically, your body nourishes the tree for the first, how many ever years that tree is available or alive. It's they bury you in like this lack of a better term, plant bag under a tree that gets planted, and then the tree's roots grow down and use your nutrients in the soil. I mean, there's so many different cool things.
Well, that's what my mom wanted to be buried on my crab apple tree, her ashes to be under there. I'm like, but if I'm not here, the next 10 years, I'm not going to pull that off.
I mean, you can put a little bit, right? Like a little bit to make her happy,
I'll probably do that, yeah.
Because that's the cool thing with ashes is like you can still
sprinkle
keep some, you can do some here, like you can honor a lot of different wishes.
Yeah. And I think going back to what you're saying with the shrines. So, I just learned from my auntie, they're like, well, make sure that you have a picture of her. I'm like, yeah, I got pictures of her. And she's like, well, no, you have a picture of her. And then you have for Chinese, you have the incense. And I think they're called jati incense sticks.
Is there a special kind?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went to the Asian market. I picked up like 800 pack for $5, and you're supposed to burn like a couple incense sticks in the morning and a couple at night. And you're supposed to bring flowers and then basically leave some fruit in a dish next to the picture. So it's kind of like an everyday. You're almost like taking care of the plant. You're taking care of the fruit. Don't eat the fruit, I guess, because it supposedly it, however mystically, takes on a bad flavor.
Oh, but sure.
Whatever, Yeah. I mean,
if you leave fruit out, it's just going to get rotten. Yeah, I mean, let's just face
it. So, I'm not in ancestral worship, but, like we just talked about, before we started the podcast, but yeah, that's something we don't do here in the States. I mean, half the time we're putting our folks in a, old folks home and then you forget about them, right?
Yeah.
And over there, a lot of times the kids will live with the parents, take care of them. I mean, there's really no homes in communist China. And then when they pass, they have little shrines. And the holidays are so much different here. I mean, here they're so commercialized. We just passed Valentine's Day, Hallmark made probably, gajillion dollars, and then whoever the florists are too.
Yeah.
And over there, they have 120 holidays in China. And coming up in April, there's like April 15th is a ancestral honor day or holiday.
Tax day here.
What's that?
Tax day here.
17th, yeah.
Or 16th, yeah.
Yep. So that week, basically everybody prepares and they celebrate and they feast, and then they go and they visit the burial site or wherever they scattered the ashes. In communist China right now, wherever they scattered the ashes, which, my brothers want to scatter some ashes in a garden overlooking, her house so that she can, quote, see her house. And then there's another one around Halloween. It's called the Ghost or whatever holiday, whatever it's said in Chinese. It's almost like the Hispanic Day of the Dead. you worship your ancestors. And then in October, I'm going to try to make it up for that is the same thing as kind of what's happening in April. It's kind of to honor your elders. So a lot of these, I mean, most of them aren't Hallmark holidays. Nobody's capitalizing on it. It's literally put into the culture to honor and remember, these folks that have passed away.
Well, and how much does that do to improve the culture when you know that you're going to kind of live on forever, right? Like what's the saying? You die twice: the day that you take your last breath and the day somebody says your name for the last time ever.
Yeah.
Right. Like and what does that do for a person? I feel like it's going to make them be a better person than what we have here, where it's like, you know what I mean? Like we have this kind of shallow, surface level, chase the buck type of, mentality in our society. And it's like I'm just trying to either buy the most stuff and die with the most toys, or I'm trying to leave the biggest impact financially on my family, there's got to be a better way to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot about respect.
Yeah.
There's no, big houses, big refrigerators, anything. A lot of it is about family. And, I say a lot of bad stuff about, communism, and this has nothing to do with communism. It has to do with culture.
Yes.
So if you're walking around China or Hong Kong, and let's say you're walking in the park and there's 3 benches out in the park, there'll be little labels or signs posted next to that park bench to remind young people to let your elders sit down first. Or if you're, walking down the stairs, I think I took some pictures of it when I was out there. There's like little signs or little labels that say, if an elderly needs help, going down the stairs, make sure that, it's a reminder to help your elders down the stairs, or help them down the, it was an escalator I was going down. So, it's something we don't have here. And maybe that's something that, we learn and adopt.
And I mean, we don't have very much culture here, period. Right. Like, if it could be because our society is so young. When you think about the age of our society, we're at 600 years, right?
Yeah.
For the United States, 500 years, whatever, 1492. I'll do the math later. We haven't, and we're also we're a melting pot. We're a bunch of different cultures that have moved here and not really adopted one kind of central culture. And that could be because of the youngness. That could be just because of how our country was founded. But I think that there's something that comes with that sort of respect that could drastically improve, right? Like somebody our age that's been raised in the United States today is not going to pick up habits like that, and it's not going to change them at their core, right? It's not going to change their values. But someone that is born into that and then raised in a capitalist country with culture and respect and values, I feel like that culture and that respect could curb a lot of the negative things that come from overzealous capitalism, and could balance out a lot of the problems that you do see in an open market capitalist society.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you say the overzealous capitalism, because we're not saying anything bad about capitalism.
No. Anything is bad out of balance, right?
Yeah. And I'm not praising communism, because basically when I'm there, these people don't have anything else. So it's a lot easier to focus on those other things that matter.
But I feel like a Japanese culture is a good example of a culture that has a lot else and also has strong values and culture like that, right?
Yeah.
From what I see from the outside, I don't know. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's a lot more of an open, I don't know if they're capitalist exactly, but a lot more of a well-balanced version of kind of like the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. They prove they can do it, but they're also pretty small.
100%.
Technically small. Whatever you want to call that compared to us. yeah, it's, I'm talking about communist China. I mean, some of this, I dedicated to my mom and, her journey over in communist China. She's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Being a woman herself doesn't, play very well. She was married twice, divorced twice, and none of it was her fault. The guys she was with were unfaithful and, tried to take her money. And she was on her own, and she became a woman that started her own business. She started a modeling agency. So when my mom was young, she was a model. She sent me a bunch of these black and white pictures, and a lot of the modeling I saw was, the alcohol.
Yeah, of course.
So kind of like the Bud Light girls.
Yep.
Yeah, except I think it was like the, probably like the Jack Daniels style.
Yeah.
So a little more classy.
Yeah.
If that is anything.
Well, yeah, I get it.
And, she had a side hustle, and her side hustle was collecting gems. So she was a jeweler on the side, and, she learned she was sharp right until the end. She turned 78 on February 4th. And the last conversation we had, which was the Thursday night before she passed on Saturday night, she was kind of laughing at me because, my kids all have 5G phones and I'm still on the iPhone 10 4G. And she said she just got her 5G phone. I'm like, you're 78 years old and you're giving me crap about, 4G and 5G.
Having the slow phone.
Yeah. And getting technical about it. But that's how she was. And she's always, tried to teach me about gems. Right up until, the last day. And she talks about politics, but she kept her mind sharp. And, I just been amazed, there's a lot of 70-year-olds here that just want to be comfortable sitting out in the garage and just watching, cars go by. And then when you talk to them, they're like already mentally, fried.
Well, and it seems like, it's going to be the heart or it's going to be the brain that's going to take you out. You're either going to be jello in your brain and your body's going to be just fine, or your body it's not going to be able to handle it and your brain's going to be sharp up until the end.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's with her is she was so in tune with her body that she knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
And she was, she griped a lot about Western medicine, and she griped a lot about, communist, medical free healthcare, was basically shit. And, but she took care of herself real well. But I think she had a good inkling she was going to be going. She talked to me about, getting ready with her, her, whatever you call it, her death planning.
Yeah.
Estate planning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it all lit up within 3 weeks,
Wow.
Then she was gone. But, just what a, squared away person. And I've only known her for 3.5 years. So for those of the listeners that don't know, it was a miracle, because when I came to the U.S., I came with my dad, and my mom and dad had split because my dad was not the best human being, and my mom met somebody else. They got married, and then he didn't want to have somebody else's kids, so they had their own son who is still in Hong Kong. He's the one I'm working through to get all the details, sorted out. But then, when we came over here, my dad had passed away when I was young. And then, we rolled through the system, ended up in a home where, and I understand having kids myself now, is that, they had their kids, and we came in, I'm thankful we had a place to stay, food to eat, and, learn some values and move on. It was a farming community. What can you not learn from being on a farm? Right?
Yeah.
So, and then, it was decades later. I prayed for, meeting my mom someday, because I didn't know what it was like to have a mom. And I thought it was the coolest thing, because sometimes I'd sit there at a mall, here's this kid that I didn't want to be seen by anybody else, but I'd sit in a mall and I'd be just watching parents, especially moms with like little kids. And then picturing what that would be like, being that little kid and having a mom, or being in college, when your buddies, their parents are like, hey, we're coming up. We want to take you out for coffee or something. I'm like, what's that like?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
or in all your events to look over and see your, have a set of parents, and there's something about moms that I don't know what it is. It's got the nurturing.
It's the nurturing, and it is it's the love without any condition, right? It's the mom, you do something bad and mom still looks at you and with that loving eye, right? Like dad's disappointed, he loves you, but he's definitely disappointed when you look at him. Mom is sad that you made a mistake, but she's still hugging you. You know, it's like that, whatever that is, 100%.
Yeah, that nurturing, unconditional love.
Yes.
And I watched that for years. And then, finally my sister-in-law, who's from Macau, uses this app called WeChat, because that's the only app that they use in China, because everything has to run through their VPN so that they can screen everything that you're saying. So, if you step wrong or say something wrong, you're going to lose some social credits. And, she found her. So there was a little bit of vetting back and forth because we weren't quite sure what was, I think each side was cautious.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally we met, and that was 2018.
Wow.
So it was pretty recent. And that was an answer to prayer. And then after that, I prayed I pray she stays alive long enough so that I can, meet her in person.
And get to know her. Yeah,
and get to know her. So it worked out where April 2019, I went over there and we met for the first time. We spent, 4 days, together. And it was just, I can't tell you how amazing that is. And that's where, I get to where we talk about, gratitude. I mean, people are like, well, you only got to know her for so long. I'm like, yeah, I got to know her for so long.
Exactly. That's a perception thing.
Yeah. Versus, I mean, what if she passed and I never got to meet her in person? What if I never got to meet her and she passed before we even found her? I got a little taste of that. I'm this big 6 foot, 230 some pound kid, and she's just like this 5'2" little tiny little fragile lady. And I was like a little puppy next to her. I was like, oh, hey, can we get, some red bean dessert? And she takes me to this diner, and I feel like I'm just this Hulk puppy sitting in this booth next to her. And she's like, get my son, what he wants. And it's like, it was the freaking best feeling in the world, and that's why I tell people, it's like, I went through this, but you know what? Those of you that have the moms or the dads or the loving parents, whether they're split or together, it's like you said, if you're sitting on the shitter, text them, say hi. And I'm starting to learn that even, self-reflecting this week is like how much I appreciate when my kids respond to a freaking text.
Yeah,
first.
100%.
I got a daughter that responds right away. My son, I'll send a text I might not hear from for a week, and then he'll answer that. So
that
how
text
was this
that was
week?
back there, yeah.
And that's fine, because that's
Yep, it's that age.
Must be the 20s,
Yep.
So, but I can't stress enough how important having those loving parents are, and I can't describe the feeling. I don't know what that is.
Yeah,
but it's unlike anything. And anything that I accomplished in life, I remember I used to tell people this is everything I accomplished career wise, crazy stuff, I would have traded that all in to have that experience for my whole life. So those that have that, parents don't take that for granted.
It is, right. Like this is the journey that we see in every Disney movie ever. 3/4 of the dramas. It's this taking what you have for granted until you lose it or almost lose it. And then there's the hero's journey back to, the dad that almost lost the family coming to realize that the family is all he ever needed. Yeah. Or the child who wanted the parents to go away because they were so mad, right? It's the Home Alone story. Like this archetypal story, this underlining archetypal story is in so much of the media that we consume, as far as the stories, the novels, the movies. It's everything. It is, you take for what you have for granted, it gets to a point where you almost destroy what you have before you realize it. And then it comes back around and you understand it. Well, what's the better way to do that? Well, the better way is to take everything that you have and be grateful for it. Right. And I think that with this podcast, I got to look back and see if we've done a gratefulness podcast. I don't know if we have.
We've talked a lot about it.
But I think it would be a specific, a good one to really get to break down into what gratefulness is, the science behind it, how it affects your brain, how it affects your emotions. But anyways, I think that, I put up a post this week on Instagram and it's just a neon sign. And it just says, these are the good old days, right? Yeah. Like, one day we're going to look back at this time right now and something's going to change. Something's going to be changed. Your kids are going to be gone. Your spouse is going to be gone. Your parents are going to be gone. Something is going to change. And you're going to look back and be like, oh, those were the good old days. But did you live in that moment? Were you in that moment realizing that love that you had, or that foot that you had, or whatever, right? Like, oh, I don't, we talk about materialism a lot, right? Like, oh my God, I wanted to have, so-and-so car. I don't have that yet. Yeah, but you have this. You have the car that you do have. You have your wife. You have your kids. You have so much. Who gives a fuck about you can be grateful and sit in a place of grace and a place of acceptance and still be good at what you do and strive for more, but you can't be emotionally connected to needing more. Yeah. And that's a big, with the Stoic podcast, we talk about that a lot, is accepting growth, but not needing growth. Yeah. And that's a big growing area for me. I'm, currently in this transition to trying to find that, trying to become really comfortable and really grateful in where I am, not always judging myself on my growth. And that's hard. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times you don't see the growth until you get in that area of gratitude. I mean, gratitude produces humility, gratitude produces, that peace. Gratitude calms the storms. Gratitude gets you through grieving. And it goes back to the parents thing too, is like, why honor them when they're dead? Mm-hmm. Why not look for ways to honor and respect the parents when they're alive? Because then not only are you honoring them for you, they're getting to feel it too. Yeah. They're getting to feel all those happy chemicals. Yeah. And they're going to feel proud of you. Yeah. Because they raised you, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, what's the best thank you to your parents is by, just honoring. And one thing that kind of wrapped this back around to your solid foundation and the 4 pillars, right? Like, when we're talking about squaring away that foundation for the storms like this, right? The rattling storms like this, whether it be death or loss or whatever it is. All 4 of those pillars are imperative in that. And if you don't think they are, then the next time you're emotionally damaged, the next time something happens and you are emotionally rocked, whether it be loss or you're just having a really bad day, go find a gym, do it in your basement. And I don't want you to do 10 push-ups. I want you to do some sort of cardio that is going to make you feel like you want to fucking die. Whether it be 100 burpees or 20 wind sprints. This is all going to depend on your physical ability. But you need to do something around, 10 to 20 minutes that makes you feel like death. And then sit there and your lungs are going to be gasping for oxygen so hard. Your stomach is going to hurt. Your head is going to hurt. And in about 5 minutes, all of that's going to settle down. And that dark cloud that you had over your entire brain is just going to fade. And the sun is just going to look gorgeous. And you are going to realize that, hey, I can make it through this. Yeah. That's the biggest thing that I get out of those sessions is when I'm in a bad place, when I'm in a really dark place and I have one of those sessions, whatever it is. For me, it's usually a sprint bike because it's just how I kill myself.
Yeah.
It's that 15, 20 minutes after and everything settles and you're just like, life is good. I'm alive. I got my health. I got my family.
Yeah.
So if you think that all those pillars aren't imperative in getting you squared away and being able to handle grief or trauma, realize that they all are. Every one of them has a backbone to that foundation.
Oh yeah. No, and that was so important. I think the first couple of days I felt like I needed to be off the grid. And sometimes I just had to sit in pure quietness, whether you call it meditation. I had to pray a lot and, really evaluate myself, instead of having just people around and noise and commotion and distraction. Just really dig deep to, basically to reset yourself and get yourself right so that, I could get to a point of, gratitude.
Yeah.
And that was quick. I mean, right away, it was just like, you know what? I mean, I'm thankful for the little time I had. And those are the best little memories. And, I'll do my best to live so that my mom will be proud of me right now. And that's all I can do. I think that'd be great. We do a session on gratitude. There's a good book out there, Life-Changing Power of Gratitude, Mark Recklow.
Yep.
Have you read that one?
No, I won't, but I will before we do the gratefulness podcast because I'll probably consume a few books before we do that so that I'm able to understand it more for myself, really, is the depth. That's what I love about these podcasts is when we decide on a topic that we're going to do, I dig deep and I learn so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on the Christian side, when they talk about prayer, one of the things I remember is ACTS. So when you pray, the acronym ACTS is, A, adoration. So when you're praying, you're praising God. C is confession, confessing your sins. T is giving thanks, and they say that, well, once you get to about 3 to 5, things that you're thankful for, because S is supplication, right? Requests. Once you get through, giving thanks, all of a sudden it's like, wow, I really don't have a lot I really want to ask for because I have everything that I need. And, that's where we got to get to the point where it's, like you said, weren't you guys practicing like every day? What are you guys thankful for? The 5 things you're thankful for that day. Yep. Because once you get past that, then you know what? It sheds a whole new perspective on your day. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that would be a good one.
Awesome. I think that pretty much wraps up. Is there anything else you want to cover? You got any in your notes?
No, I think we covered it. And like I said, for me, it was a week that I wanted to kind of share with everybody that how important it is to be squared away when going through the grievance process. And to come out of, there is a book, Grievance to Gratitude or Grief to Gratitude.
I did see that, and I tried looking up a few videos with that Julie Kramer, and it was tough. I couldn't find any that had good meat in them. So maybe the book would be a lot better to try to get through. But I just tried, high spotting a few videos, and I couldn't find much.
She's a little bit new agey, but
new agey, yeah.
The concept, of converting grief to gratitude, is natural. It should be how it is.
If I've listened to Eckhart Tolle, I can listen to anybody.
I suppose, yeah.
That was a tough one. That was a tough one to get through.
Yeah, so she's pretty much like your witch doctor.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I believe in universal energy, I believe in a lot of that stuff. Like if there's so many times where you feel something, right? Like you feel something, you sense something, and then all of a sudden, like it happens, and you're like, oh, like that didn't just magically happen like that. Like there's something else going on here, right? Like because I've used this analogy before, and after this analogy, we'll cut this off because I'm rambling now. But if I handed you, right, yeah, right. If we had two-way radios, right, but you knew nothing about the two-wave radio technology. I just handed you a two-wave radio, and I walked to the other room and I started talking to you. That would seem like magic, right? Like, because you don't know anything about the technology. You'd be like, this thing is not connected to him, and I don't see any connection, right? Because you can't see the radio waves coming in,
Yeah,
right?
I've heard this before, yeah.
Yeah. Have I used this on here before?
I don't know. No, I've heard it somewhere else.
Okay. So you can't see the two-wave radio, the radio signals coming in, but you're looking at it, you're like, this box is magic, right? But then once we are able to see the science behind it, and you're like, oh, okay, these radio waves go through and then this box picks up the signal. Well, there's no saying that there's not a lot of other signals out there that are happening between you and me and between the universe, between plants, between everything, that there's a lot of other waves of signal, waves of energy that we just don't have the ability to see yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
And so there's a lot more going on in this world than we want to think there is.
Yeah.
That was the only reason that was my analogy, the reason behind my analogy.
And that's basically like faith too, right?
Yeah, kind of.
There's a lot that we don't see.
Yeah.
That we don't know. So.
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
All right. That is a wrap. Hope you guys have an awesome week, and we'll catch you next week.